Life is full of uncertainties, unexpected challenges that can shake our faith and leave us searching for peace. Yet, there is a powerful truth that brings comfort. God is in control. No matter how chaotic life may feel, His plans for us are filled with purpose and hope. C.S. Lewis, one of the greatest Christian thinkers, often wrote about the importance of trusting God in every circumstance. His reflections remind us that faith is not about having all the answers. It's about choosing to trust when things don't make sense. Today, we'll explore how God's sovereignty, faith through trials, and hope for the future can transform our outlook on life. Whether you're facing a storm or simply seeking reassurance, this reflection will remind you to keep believing and trust in God's unfailing love. Stay with us as we uncover the peace that comes from surrendering to God's perfect plan. So, let's dive in. Understanding God's sovereignty is foundational to a life of faith. To say that God is sovereign means He has supreme authority and control over all aspects of creation. From the vastness of the universe to the smallest details of our lives, nothing happens without His knowledge and permission. This truth can be both comforting and challenging, especially when we face life's uncertainties. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "The great thing to remember is that, though our feelings come and go, God's love for us does not." This insight helps us grasp the importance of trusting in God's sovereignty. Too often, we judge God's presence or goodness based on our circumstances. When life is smooth and blessings abound, it's easy to believe God is near. However, when we face trials, doubts tend to creep in, and we may question whether God is truly in control. The Bible provides reassurance of God's plan for us, even in challenging moments. Jeremiah 29 verse 11 declares, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." This verse reminds us that God's plans are purposeful and designed for our good, even when we cannot immediately see the outcome. To understand God's sovereignty, think of a tapestry being woven. Up close, the threads may appear tangled and chaotic. It's only when we step back and view the entire design that we see the intricate beauty of the pattern. Similarly, God is weaving every moment of our lives, both joyful and painful, into a masterpiece for His glory and our ultimate good. Consider Sarah's story. She faced financial hardship and personal struggles that left her feeling abandoned by God. Despite her despair, she decided to pray daily and release her worries to Him. Slowly, small blessings began to unfold. She noticed opportunities she hadn't seen before, and though her situation didn't change overnight, her perspective did. She learned to trust God's timing and eventually saw His plan unfold in ways she never anticipated. Her journey illustrates the power of surrendering to God's sovereignty. The Apostle Paul also recognized the comfort in God's control. In Romans 8 verse 28 he wrote, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." This doesn't mean life will be free of pain or disappointment. Rather, it means that every experience, whether triumph or trial, is part of God's divine plan for shaping us into who He intends us to be. Embracing God's sovereignty means relinquishing the illusion of control. It requires trust, even when life feels uncertain. As we rest in the knowledge that God is in control, we can experience peace beyond understanding. Our circumstances may not change, but our hearts will. In surrendering to God's plan, we find freedom, hope, and the assurance that we are never outside of His care. Trials are an inevitable part of life. They come in various forms: illness, financial hardships, broken relationships, or loss. During these challenging moments, our faith is tested in ways that can either deepen or weaken our trust in God. Yet, it is precisely through these trials that our faith has the opportunity to grow. C.S. Lewis, in The Problem of Pain, wrote, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world." This powerful statement reminds us that pain often draws us closer to God in ways that comfort cannot. When life is going smoothly, we may be tempted to rely on our own strength. Success and ease can create a false sense of control. However, when trials strike, they remind us of our limitations and lead us to seek God's presence and strength. In these moments of vulnerability, faith is transformed from an abstract concept into a lifeline. Faith is not about having all the answers. It's about trusting in God even when the answers are unclear. The Bible offers numerous examples of individuals who remained faithful through trials. The Apostle Paul is one such figure. Despite facing beatings, imprisonment, shipwrecks, and countless hardships, Paul maintained an unwavering trust in God. In Romans 8 verse 28 he wrote, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." This verse does not imply that all circumstances are inherently good, but it emphasizes that God can use even the darkest moments to fulfill his divine purposes. Consider the analogy of refining gold. Gold is purified through intense heat, which removes impurities and leaves behind something more valuable. Similarly, trials serve to purify our faith. They strip away pride, self-sufficiency, and distractions, allowing us to focus on God's promises. James 1 verses 2 to 4 highlights this truth. "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Trials are not meant to break us, but to build us into stronger, more resilient followers of Christ. Real-life stories often illustrate how faith grows through adversity. Take the story of John, who lost his job unexpectedly. Initially, fear and doubt consumed him. But through daily prayer and reading Scripture, John began to trust God's provision. Over time, new opportunities arose, and though the journey was difficult, his faith grew stronger as he experienced God's faithfulness firsthand. Faith through trials is about making a choice. We can choose to let fear and doubt take control, or we can lean into God's promises, trusting that He is with us every step of the way. Though trials may be painful, they are also opportunities for spiritual transformation, turning moments of despair into testimonies of God's grace and power. Belief is central to our relationship with God and our ability to trust His plan for our lives. It is the foundation upon which faith is built, a conscious choice to trust in God's promises even when we cannot see the full picture. C.S. Lewis frequently explored the tension between belief and doubt, emphasizing that belief is not about having all the answers, but about trusting in God's character and purpose despite life's uncertainties. In Mere Christianity, Lewis likened faith to stepping onto a bridge we cannot fully see. Though fear may linger, we choose to take the step, trusting that the bridge will hold us. This analogy captures the essence of belief. It is an act of surrender, a decision to trust God's plan even when circumstances seem uncertain or challenging. It acknowledges that we may not understand every aspect of life, but we trust the one who does. The Bible underscores the power of belief in many passages. Hebrews 11 verse 1, NIV, defines faith as confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This verse highlights the role of belief as the driving force behind faith. Even when we cannot see or comprehend God's full plan, belief provides the assurance that God is in control and that His purposes are good. Belief is essential for navigating life's challenges. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, with fog obscuring the path ahead. God calls us to take a step, but we cannot see where the road leads. In that moment, belief becomes a leap of faith, a willingness to trust God's voice over our fears. It is this act of surrender that enables us to walk in God's plan, even when the outcome is uncertain. One of the greatest examples of belief in the Bible is Abraham's story. God called Abraham to leave his home and journey to an unknown land, promising to make him the father of many nations. Despite not knowing where he was going or how God's promises would be fulfilled, Abraham believed. His belief in God's faithfulness sustained him through years of waiting and uncertainty. In Genesis 15 verse 6 we read, "Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness." Abraham's story illustrates that belief is not just about intellectual acceptance. It is a deep trust that moves us to action. Belief also helps us overcome doubt. C.S. Lewis taught that faith is not the absence of doubt, but the decision to trust God in the face of it. Doubts may arise, but belief chooses to hold on to God's promises, knowing that His plans are higher than ours. Ultimately, belief opens the door to God's work in our lives. It invites His peace, strength, and guidance as we surrender control and trust in His perfect plan. Though we may not always understand the why behind life circumstances, belief assures us that God is working all things together for our good. With belief as our anchor, we can move forward with confidence, knowing that God's plans are always for our ultimate good and His glory. One of the most challenging aspects of faith is learning to trust in God's timing. We live in a fast-paced world that values instant gratification, quick solutions, immediate answers, and rapid results. However, God operates on a different timeline, one that is perfect, but often beyond our understanding. Trusting in His timing requires patience, surrender, and a deep belief that He knows what is best for us. C.S. Lewis often reflected on the nature of waiting and God's timing. In one of his writings, he said, "I am sure that God keeps no one waiting unless He sees that it is good for him to wait." This statement highlights the transformative purpose of waiting. God doesn't make us wait to punish or frustrate us. Instead, He uses waiting as a tool to refine our character, strengthen our faith, and prepare us for the blessings He has in store. The Bible is filled with examples of individuals who learn to trust God's timing. One of the most notable is the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. As a young man, Joseph received dreams from God that foretold his rise to a position of authority. However, his path to that destiny was anything but straightforward. He was sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused of a crime, and imprisoned for years. Yet, despite these setbacks, Joseph remained faithful. In time, God elevated him to the position of second-in-command over Egypt, fulfilling the very dreams Joseph had been given. Reflecting on his journey, Joseph declared in Genesis 50 verse 20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Joseph's story illustrates that God's timing is often slower than we expect, but always purposeful. Another powerful verse about God's timing is found in Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1. "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens." This passage reminds us that life unfolds in seasons, times of planting, waiting, and harvesting. Just as a farmer cannot rush the growth of crops, we cannot rush God's plans. Trusting in His timing means accepting each season for what it is and remaining patient as He works behind the scenes. Patience is not passive waiting. It is active faith. Isaiah 40 verse 31 beautifully captures this truth. "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." Waiting on God allows us to draw strength from Him. It's during the waiting that our trust deepens, our character is refined, and our relationship with God grows. In today's world, Patience is often seen as a weakness, but in God's kingdom, it is a mark of spiritual maturity. Learning to wait on God's timing is an act of surrender, a declaration that we trust Him more than we trust our own plans. Though waiting can be difficult, it ultimately leads to blessings that exceed our expectations, for God's timing is always perfect. Hope is one of the most powerful gifts God gives to His children. It is the assurance that no matter what circumstances we face, God has a plan for our future, a plan filled with goodness, purpose, and eternal joy. C.S. Lewis often wrote about hope in the context of faith and eternity, reminding us that the trials of this life are temporary compared to the glory that awaits us. He famously said, "In the weight of glory, there are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind." Hope anchors us when life feels uncertain or overwhelming. It provides the strength to endure challenges, knowing that better days are ahead. The Bible offers countless reminders of God's promises for our future. One of the most well-known verses is Jeremiah 29, verse 11. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." This verse reveals God's heart for His people. His plans are never to destroy us, but to lead us into a future filled with hope and purpose. However, hope is not just wishful thinking. Biblical hope is a confident expectation rooted in God's character and promises. It is not dependent on circumstances, but on the unchanging nature of God's love and faithfulness. Romans 15 verse 13 says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in Him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." True hope comes from trusting in God's goodness and relying on the Holy Spirit to sustain us in every situation. C.S. Lewis also emphasized the eternal nature of hope. He believed that our ultimate hope is not found in this world, but in the life to come. In Mere Christianity, he wrote, "If we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world." This perspective reminds us that earthly struggles are temporary compared to the eternal joy and peace we will experience in God's presence. Hope also empowers us to live with purpose in the present. When we trust in God's promises for the future, we are freed from fear and discouragement. We can face today's challenges with courage, knowing that God is working all things together for our good. Hope gives us the strength to persevere, the resilience to overcome setbacks, and the joy to keep moving forward. In times of difficulty, it's natural for hope to waver. Yet, even in our darkest moments, God invites us to hold on to His promises. Hebrews 6 verse 19 describes hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. Like an anchor that keeps a ship steady in a storm, hope keeps us grounded in God's love and faithfulness. No matter what the future holds, we can rest in the assurance that God is in control. He holds our future in His hands, and His plans for us are good, with hope. No matter what you are facing today, take comfort in this unchanging truth. God is in control. Life may be filled with uncertainties, but God's sovereignty, timing, and promises remain constant. He sees the bigger picture, and His plans for you are filled with hope, purpose, and love. C.S. Lewis's reflections remind us that faith is not the absence of struggle, but the decision to trust God despite our circumstances. His words encourage us to keep believing, especially during life's most challenging moments. When we surrender to God's timing and lean on His promises, we can experience peace that surpasses understanding. Faith is strengthened through trials. Hope anchors us in storms, and patience refines us as we wait for God's perfect plan to unfold. Remember the assurance in Romans 8 verse 28, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him." Even when life feels chaotic, God is working behind the scenes for your good. So, keep believing, keep trusting. Know that every challenge is an opportunity to draw closer to God. His love is unfailing, His timing is perfect, and His promises are true. Let this hope be your anchor. There are far better things ahead than anything left behind. As you move forward, trust that God is with you every step of the way, guiding you into a future filled with grace and hope. What part of today's message spoke to you the most? Share your thoughts or prayer requests in the comments. We'd love to hear from you and encourage each other.